Ti hei Maori ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathleen Drum. I'm TIFF's Industry Director, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you to this masterclass with Taika Waititi. To begin, I would like to acknowledge that today's events are taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe and the Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in their community. I'd like to recognise our friends at Pinewood for supporting this session. Thanks to James Ryder, to Tara Halloran and the Pinewood teams, not just here in Toronto, but around the world, for your support for TIFF and for the independent filmmaking community. Before I introduce our guests, a reminder please that no professional photography or video recording is allowed inside the studio. However, we are live streaming to our website and YouTube channel. A warm hello to our audiences tuning in. Please do feel free to tweet using the hashtag on the screen behind me to keep the conversation going with our online audience. Taika Waititi is a New Zealand filmmaker, actor, comedian, illustrator, and artist. Yay, Taika! We are so excited. We are so excited to have Taika here. He first came to attention with his Oscar-nominated short, Two Cars, One Night, which demonstrated Taika's affinity for directing young actors, his idiosyncratic sense of humour, and his empathetic approach to portraying marginalised characters. In his work, he provides a snapshot of the human condition, often observing life through the lens of a child, and in his films, it is the children who express optimism and resilience. This approach has resonated with audiences. Taika's first feature, Eagle vs. Shark, pre-sold to Miramax off the promo reel. And as the sales agent, I was very fortunate to have made that deal. Yay! His second film, Boy, stormed the New Zealand box office. His third, What We Do in the Shadows, gained a cult following and is soon to become a television series, while his fourth, Hunt for the Wilder People, sold around the world and with $12 million in home earnings, became the best local film in the history of the New Zealand box office. That's more than Lord of the Rings. It's number one and Boy is number two. Taika is of Te Whānau Apanui descent and carries his values and cultural identity with him. He was named New Zealander of the Year in 2017, fronting a high-profile anti-racism campaign, and has been outspoken on child poverty and teen suicide. While directing Thor Ragnarok, Taika prioritised the hiring of Indigenous cast and crew members. A decided multitasker, in the last couple of weeks, Taika has wrapped the shoot of his new film, Jojo Rabbit, in Prague and served as a member of the Venice Film Festival jury, jumping on a plane literally yesterday morning from Italy to join us. Cameron Bailey will lead us through this conversation. He is both, yay, Cameron! He is both TIFF's new co-head and the organisation's artistic director, overseeing the vision and direction of the festival, as well as TIFF's year-round programming. A former film critic and journalist, he has been published in the Globe and Mail, The Village Voice, Cine Action and Screen. For 6 consecutive years, Toronto Life magazine has named Cameron as one of the city's 50 most influential people. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to a pretty impressive couple of guys, Cameron Bailey and Taika Waititi.
Taika Waititi, how you doing? Welcome everyone in the spirit of Kathleen's introduction. Yay that we're here.
this working? Is this working? Is this?
It will be, yeah.
It's
Here we go.
working? Okay.
It's coming. Taika, welcome. Thanks so much, first of all, for coming from Venice, from your shoot, all the things you've been doing. I'm sure
Oh,
you're
it's an
jet-lagged as hell.
absolute pleasure to be here to grace you.
And if you feel the need to take a nap during the conversation, that's perfectly fine.
Okay,
No worries
I
at all.
will.
I want to begin by maybe peeling back some of the layers, because, I mean, everybody knows you as an enormously successful filmmaker, as a guy who is effortlessly charming and devastatingly stylish, of course.
I thought you were going to say good looking, but okay.
Well, you know, that goes with the territory. But I know that that's never the whole story with anybody, right? And I'm curious to know about the different things that you've created to really become the person that you are. And because so much of your work is about childhood, relationships between children and parents, I'm curious to know a little bit more about your own childhood, how you came to become the artist you are. And maybe the first thing I would ask is, what's the first thing you remember creating as a work of art? Piece of writing. There may be an actual. Is
there a baby in here?
All right.
Bring me that
Yes.
baby. I want the baby. I won't talk unless I'm holding a baby.
There's the baby.
How
right
old
at
is the
back.
baby? 9 months. It's a long time to go after that. Take it from me. There's a long. That's the beginning.
Do you remember
You're trying to
writing?
get personal. You're trying to get
I
personal.
mean,
Straight from the.
let's see how it goes.
Okay,
if
we'll
I
see
look
how it
into
goes.
your eyes, maybe we will get personal.
Well, okay.
Is there a piece of writing, a piece of art you remember making?
My mother was, well, she is, she's still alive, but she was a school teacher. So, and I grew up with her. She's a solo mum, broken home. Parents split up when I was young. But she was the person really who like forced me to think. Really. So she would read all of my essays and stuff that I was writing, and then grade them before I handed them in.
Is that right?
Yeah. So she would like read my stuff and then say that's not good enough. And
How
this
old
is
were
a
you
C.
when this was happening?
All through my entire life.
Really?
Yeah, even at university. And and then she would read them, and then she would make me rewrite them. And so that's what I had to deal with. Was this like overpowering Russian Jewish mother who just demanded that I was better. And so so I think a lot of it. A lot of my my love for my parents is, I think, probably coming from their lack of, well, actually probably their sort of rugged love for each other, which manifested itself in a kind of non-love for each other. So they were,
I'm not sure if I want to ask more about that, but
No, I'll be
how
straight
much
up.
do you want to say?
When they met, my mother was going around prisons with her friend, giving books to inmates, and that's how she met my dad. And he was in jail, and that's how they met. And then they struck up a relationship. And so, he's an artist. He was a painter, a sculptor, brilliant artist. He's dead. It's fine. We're all gonna die. And so they met, and so it's like this weird sort of middle class Jewish family, all intellectuals and all school teachers, mixed with this farming family who were all criminals, and so it was like actually a kind of and artists and painters, and so it was a perfect kind of mix, really.
And as you're growing up, there's got to come a time when you're trying to figure out who you are in the mix of those two families. And
Yeah,
we have
a saying,
which
which is especially to do with colonialism, and especially with, I mean, no one ever uses this term anymore, half caste, but growing up, that was like that was the term you'd use. And in New Zealand, there's a sort of this idea of being born strangling yourself if you've come from two different worlds.
Really?
So I think
What
throughout
is
my
that about?
life
What does
is
that
this
mean?
idea of because you're dealing with two different races who are combating each other.
And that's seen as a negative thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
But I see it as a positive thing because it's two cultures who are self-deprecating, got great senses of humour, and have been oppressed, throughout time. So, yeah. So I take a lot of strength from coming from both those worlds, and I think I've probably spent more of my time identifying myself as a Māori filmmaker, but also that there's another side of me that is.
And did that shift as you were growing up? Did you identify as maybe more Maori from the very beginning, or was that a transition?
Yeah, because the Jewish community in New Zealand is very small, and we weren't practicing because my mother's family were communists, and they gave up religion, and so we'd observe a few things growing up, but if you're brown in New Zealand, you're going to identify with brown people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And within the Maori community in school and that kind of thing, the fact that you were biracial, was that an issue, or could you find your place there?
It wasn't. No. The issue really was that I was smart.
What do you mean by that?
And that's an issue that I think that most people have in not only culturally where you come from, but also in school as well. So I'd have to pretend that I wasn't smart enough. And I'd pretend. So and I just. At school, I was a social butterfly, so I would just flit around, I'd hang out with the goths. I'd go and hang out with like the math nerds, and go and hang out with the artists, and go and hang out with the rugby. I would play rugby,
played rugby as well?
Yeah. And so I'd go and be in the first 15, and then I'd go, be a jock, and then I'd be, and then so like every sort of little group at school, I'd try and wedge myself into.
Why?
I just want to be liked.
Yeah. At what point did you think, was it in high school or whenever it was, that being an artist was really what you wanted to do with your life rather than just one of the parts of you?
Well, that actually happened at a very early age because my mother she just wanted me to be a writer or to do something artistic. And my dad was a painter, and he just wanted me to do something like that. And so they actually discouraged me from doing things like law or anything like that.
Really?
Yeah. No, I mean that would have disappointed them.
I see.
Completely disappointed them if I'd gone down that route. Yeah. No, they were, both of them were extremely proud when I said, I don't really know how to do maths.
Interesting. Although I'm trying to imagine you as a lawyer now.
The worst lawyer. Shoot him.
So you were encouraged by your parents to become an artist from an early age.
Right from the beginning, yeah.
And was it writing that was the first expression of
Yeah,
your?
writing was the first thing. I'm a really good artist. I'm really good at painting and drawing. So I learned that from my dad from an early age. He's like he's dead now. He's dead. But growing up with him, he was, I guess what you call it, just like trendy term now. Was he outsider artist?
Oh yes.
And so he was one of them. He was like brilliant artist though. He has like a real kind of like got a real Rousseau kind of vibe to his stuff. And he, so I grew up with this guy, and he would, we'd just paint together and draw together and stuff, and that's how I learned everything. And
do you have his work? Do you own it? Yeah.
Yeah. And he painted thousands of paintings.
Really?
Yeah.
Any favorite paintings? Any pieces that would help illustrate who he was?
I do. I don't know if I've got it on my phone, but I wish I bought it. 2 great portraits of my younger brothers, and when you look at this part of it, it's there's and naive is also in like a, you know, it's a negative sort of term for painting, you know, because I think of it as like very expressionistic and just like it's sort of actually more true. You're just painting what you see. Doesn't matter what you know. And anyway, these are my two favorite paintings of his, and these two portraits of my brothers. And from here up, are just these beautiful, interesting portraits. But the way he got my younger brothers to sit still was, if you like expand out, they're holding PlayStation things. So he's like, okay, yeah, if you guys play, because they're like, so there's like,
It's a realist painting. Then.
Real,
That's just
yeah,
who they
yeah,
are.
yeah. And he's got them. He painted them with these PlayStation consoles. And they're my two favorite paintings of his.
That's perfect. So in terms of getting into film then, what was your initial exposure to movies growing up? It sounds like you came from a very artistic family. Were you also watching serious cinema at home?
Not as a kid. Not as a kid, because why would you? But my mother took me to see Akira in 1989. And she said, oh, I'm going to take you to see a cartoon. And
She called it
yeah.
That's the way to do it.
And that was probably one of the seminal moments in my life where I realized, you can mix these things up, and you know, and there's no rules really. And after that, I came to filmmaking quite late, so I was basically painting all through my 20s, and then about 28 or 29, I decided that that one thing I hadn't tried was filmmaking. And I was doing a TV show in New Zealand called, I'm not going to say what it was called, but I was playing stripper. And
As you do.
As you do. And I was like getting my body waxed and stuff, and I was like, and I was sitting in the green room in like a G-string, eating cans of tuna. And I was like, you know what? I think that there's something else out there for me.
That was the moment.
Yeah, that was the moment.
In
I remember sitting there, I was like looking at my ingrown hairs on my leg. I was like, there's got to be something more for me. I don't know if is my destiny to realize someone else's dream of making a TV show about a strip club. And that's when I wrote my first short film. It was in that green room. So I have to thank that TV show for inspiring me. And so I wrote that, and that was Two Cars, One Night, and that was the one that went to the Oscars. And sort of like in New Zealand, it's like you kind of get, if you do anything well, you get encouraged, basically by the Prime Minister. Yeah, to keep going, you know, to keep going. So, but the Film Commission were really great. You know, they recognised that you know that there might be a future for me, and so they said, why don't you keep going? Why don't you keep writing? Why don't you keep doing more things? So I made a few more short films, but it was really like I'm not like one of those like, you know, guys who grew up, you know, with a Super 8 camera, you know, as a 10-year-old, you know, dreaming of being a filmmaker. Sure. I started dreaming of becoming a filmmaker in my 30s. Right. So it was like an arranged marriage, really. It was like I was forced to fall in love with it, and I did.
We have
eventually.
the G-string to thank.
Yeah.
Yes. We have a clip from one of your early short films from 2004 called Two Cars, One Night. Anything you want to tell us about this before we watch?
Yeah, so I wrote this in a green room and then wearing a G-string. This is set in my hometown, where it's basically about kids sitting in cars outside of a pub, and it's just how kids interact, and you know, and yeah, it's exactly how I grew up, and yeah, and that's one thing I realized early on. It's like, yeah, write what you know, and also at the time in New Zealand, short films were all about like there's always a twist in a short film. It was like, oh, she's a ghost. You know, it's like, but I was like, I don't want to do that. I just want to like, make it feel like it was a scene from a movie, or a scene, you know. So my short films have never got like a twist they've never felt like a joke.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Well, let's have a look at that clip from Two
Let's.
Cars, One Night. So much going on in that clip. Let me ask you first, when you watch that now from, 14 years ago, what strikes you first?
Well, I just think about those kids, really.
Yeah.
But the kids that I put in that film.
Are you still in touch with them?
No.
No.
No. I tend to just pluck kids out of obscurity and give them this big opportunity and then abandon them.
Good to know. It's a good thing you didn't get that baby back there.
I've also realized that I'm wearing these stupid socks. I just looked at that. I was like, it wasn't the perfect choice for today.
I like the socks. So much of your work deals with childhood, boyhood in many cases especially. But the kids aren't just cute or they're not just innocent. In many cases, they're neither. They're richer than that, and they seem like they're truer to life, to what kids are. Kids can be rough, they can be difficult, obviously, and they have a stronger sense of themselves than sometimes the movies give them credit for. Can you talk a little bit about how you created the boy characters here, the children here, and some of your other work as well?
Well, that particular film I just wrote based on conversations that I remembered from being a kid,
Okay.
with my family. Mm-hmm. And so we would basically what would happen, we'd go outside a pub with our parents, they'd all go inside and get wasted and park all their cars up. And all the kids in the car park would just go between cars and talk and just have these ridiculous conversations. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, there were people being stabbed inside the pub and being having fights and so it was, for me, it was a very interesting backdrop, really. Mm-hmm. Just to show a conversation between a little kid and a girl, and it's not really a love story. I'm not sure what it is really, mm-hmm. but it's again, you write what you know. So and we shot that at the pub that I would sit outside when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So I'd take these kids and they were like, yeah, well, you know this pub, and so because it's it was one of those situations that kept going
and that conversation about being a gay, that's something that you would have overheard as well.
Yeah, for sure, but not really not as blatant as that. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In New Zealand, it's only now in New Zealand where you would admit to wanting to be a dancer or wanting to be an actor. If you'd said that in the 80s, you'd get the shit kicked out of you. Really? You'd just be like, wanting to be an artist in the 80s, when I was a kid, it was not cool. And so, where I come from, there's 3 jobs: growing dope, working in the forestry, and driving the trucks that take the logs out of the forest. pretty much, you know. I mean, there's other things you can do, but it's like there's not, you know, so like growing up, if you were to say in the 80s, I want to be a ballerina.
No.
No way.
Well, that touches on something else I see in that clip as well, when the adult goes by, the man goes by, and he and the boy give each other the kind of the head nod, the sense of there's a code of masculinity, the boy's learning it, the man has it already, and masculinity has rules, right, including being tough and aggressive and all of that. And that's something that's come up in your work again and again. How do you feel about that definition of masculinity?
Well, that really is like, you know, he's looking at like a future version of himself. You know, he's looking at what he could become. And so I think in all my films, it's always about, with kids especially, there's always a theme of like what you could become, you know, and it's a choice, really. And I made a choice to not become that, and I made a choice to...
How did you make that choice if that was so ever-present around you?
It's just too stressful to be in that world.
Wouldn't it have been easier to be a tough guy?
Nah, I think it's actually more stressful to be in a gang and more stressful to be trying to be tough and trying to fuck people over and, you know, and like beat people up and stab people. It's like, I think it's easier to, I mean, look, choosing the path of the artist is tough, but I think that's like most of my family are in that world, and I see them, and they're stressed out all the time, you know. And kids I grew up with, you know, my age, they look 20 years older than me, you know. I mean, I look pretty young because I'm just sort of blessed for this.
Yeah. It's hard to look at you, actually.
It is hard, isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, sometimes I like walk past a mirror and I'm just like...
You just can't.
Who is that? I mean, I'm telling the truth. It's just, you know, and that's something I have to deal with every day.
I know. The rest of us can't imagine.
You can, because you're right next to me. Yep, and all of you can.
Let's try and get back on track.
Man, why are we talking about my beautiful face again? Let's get back on track.
All right, it's right here. I want to move on to Boy now, from 2010. And we have a clip, but a lot of people would have seen Boy. Have you seen Boy? Yes? All right, great. So
4 people.
A little more than that. If you haven't, please see it. You can find it in many places.
Yeah, just Google Boy movies. Google little boy. Inappropriate.
Yes, yes, totally. What can you tell us about your film called Boy and the making of it?
And making it, well, it was an extension really of that short film of 2001. It was an extension of that, and again, set in my hometown. A lot of my family are in the film. Yeah, like it was, and that's, I think, still is my favorite of my films because of the personal connection to where we shot, and it's a very personal film, and it's, I wouldn't say autobiographical, but I would say it's still, yeah, the most personal of my films, and yeah, just to take a film crew back there, and at the time we shot, there was like no cell phone coverage and no internet, so we
Where was it? Where was the location?
It's on the east coast of New Zealand, so it's you have like, so you get Wellington, Auckland, and then that's where I'm from.
Oh, okay.
In the middle of nowhere.
It's quite remote.
Yeah, in my town, it's a little fishing village, and there's probably like 600 people, and I'm related to everyone. So it's impossible to find love. And when you do, you don't tell anyone about it. Yeah, so Yeah, we shot there. Like my uncles and aunties are in the film, my cousins are in the film, my sisters in the film. Like, yeah. So yeah, and we shot in the house I grew up in, like as a kid. And I was raised by very similar situation. I was raised by my grandmother, I was raised by my grandmother, and yeah, it's really funny that we were brought up on a farm, and we had cows, and we would like milk cows, but the milk we would drink in our house was baby powder, baby formula, because like we'd like give all the milk, the milk would like be shipped out.
It's too valuable to drink.
Yeah. And so like so and a classic saying in our house growing up was, "Who's going to make the milk?" You'd be like stirring the milk.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. Huh.
But yeah, so that's and so it's my favorite of my films.
All right. Let's have a look at this clip from Boy. This is when the lead character introduces his life and his family. Let me ask you about comedy. It's a hard thing to talk about sometimes because it can get not very funny. But
it's a really difficult thing to talk about.
It kind of is. One of the things I'm most interested in, actually impressed by in your work, is that you take things that in other artists' hands, other storytellers' hands are tragic, dysfunctional, that kind of stuff, that material about people who don't have a lot and have a lot of hardship in their life, and you find jokes in it, which is a tough thing to do. How do you do that?
Well, I think luckily I come from a culture who makes fun of themselves a lot. You know, we're very self-deprecating. I think we find the humor we find is in the situation we're in. So it's not, and it's a shitty situation that we've found ourselves in, but also we've made the best of it. And yeah, I think we're funny people, and we laugh a lot. We joke about everything from being poor to being starving to being, to being in jail to every sort of shitty situation. We'll find a way to make light of it.
Okay. Now that's one thing when you're laughing within the Maori community, but to make a film that everybody's going to see, do you ever fear that people will be laughing at the characters in your movie?
I don't care about that, but also I don't. Well, yeah.
No, not a problem.
It's funny, man. I had this interview with this guy from National Geographic when I was doing that movie.
Really?
And after I did that movie, and he goes, "So tell me, when you took the cameras and the lights to your village, what was the reaction of the elders and the other villagers?" I was like, well, everyone pulled out their cell phones and took photos. And then they got bored because film sets are boring as shit, and then they left. Yeah. But so there's an image. Also, no, that film got terrible reviews. One particularly terrible review from Variety because I'm not going to talk about them. But and I think the issue that the reviewer had was that no one was riding a whale or something. It was there's not enough cultural specificity, and I was like, this is pretty fucking specific, man. And they're like, oh yeah, man, where's all the ghosts and shit, and all the people fucking talking to trees and floating around in the fucking in the realms of the spirits, and so I thought, we don't do that shit. We fucking mix our milk and try and fucking live.
Yeah. You may be aware that in Canada there's a lot of debate happening right now about stories, Indigenous storytellers, and who has the ability and the access to tell stories like you've been telling. And my sense is that a lot of these debates that are happening here have been happening in New Zealand a long time ago, but just different history, different demographics, much bigger part of the overall population in New Zealand. Is there anything that you know from what's happening here that you think Canadians could all learn from in terms of what you've been able to accomplish in New Zealand?
Turn that camera off. I say that because I get in a lot of trouble when I mouth off about New Zealand. That I'm public enemy number one.
Really?
No, because I'll say they say, oh, what's it like in New Zealand? I'm like, oh, it's racist. And then they go, oh, you're supposed to be a spokesperson for this country. But it is. And it's a fucked up country, but it's a beautiful country, and I'm patriotic, and I love my country, and we've got a great prime minister now. Things are turning, and we've got a beautiful woman who's a prime minister who's pregnant. She just had a baby with her boyfriend. And she's unapologetic about when she got it, and she's pregnant, and they were like, oh, what happens if you get pregnant? She's like, I'm not here to talk about my womb. I'm here to run a country. It shouldn't matter. So it's a great country, and I'm really proud of where I come from, but also, there's shit that we deal with, and in our storytelling, I think a lot of Indigenous cultures will look to Māoridom and say like, oh yeah, you guys got it right. Yeah, we did get some parts right. There's a lot of shit we've got to work on. And I would say like, yes, Indigenous people should be telling their own stories. It's, yeah, unless someone is like, sort of, making themselves part of that culture and like, really learning about it, and instead of like someone else from another culture coming in and telling our stories, who are just, and all they care about is box office or, or just making the film. It's got to be about actually like bringing the message within the rectangle. And so, yeah, I think it's vital that we keep telling our own stories, because it's the only way that we're going to get that specificity. And I don't think anyone would be able to make Boy the way that I've made it, because a non-Māori, because it's something that's very specific to how many Māori have grown up, or have had that experience. And so I think it's very, very important that we put the stories in the hands of the people who own those stories.
Thank you. I want to ask you, before we go to the audience and your questions, about a couple of projects you have coming up. Maybe first I'll ask you about Bubbles, but even before we talk about Bubbles, we have you're a big fan of Michael Jackson, is that right? Still, to this day?
Yeah, still.
I like that, me too. We have a little something to show that maybe demonstrates some of your love for Michael. You can just spend the next 15 minutes watching this.
Omar Sharif with the cat, dressed as Michael Jackson.
So tell us about Bubbles.
So Bubbles is a stop-motion animation that I'm doing with a company called Starburns, who did Anomalisa. And yeah, it's basically just the story of Michael Jackson's chimpanzee. And, no one's been brave enough to tell his story until now. Many have tried. It's only 2018, it's like, just now.
Overdue.
Yeah, it's overdue. It's overdue. And so I went to Florida and I visited Bubbles and I interviewed him, and I got the truth. And so he signed to me.
Great. You have the rights and, yeah? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He said, it was really crazy. And so that's the thing that I'm working on. I'm working on a few projects, but yeah, that one in particular.
And Jojo Rabbit.
And Jojo Rabbit, yeah.
Tell us about Jojo Rabbit.
One person. My assistant. Jojo Rabbit is a film I wrote in 2011, I think. And it's a comedy set in World War II. You got to do one of those. And what am I going to say about it?
Is that all you want to say about it?
I don't know. You're not going to show a photo
No,
of me?
no. I have nothing to show, but you can describe it if you choose.
I choose to describe it. What am I going to say about this? It's just a film. It's just a film about a little kid growing up in World War II, and it's really good. It's messed up. It's a messed up film. You can read about it. Okay. Just Google Little Boy. Little Boys, World War II.
When will we be able to see Jojo Rabbit, do you think?
If it sees the light of day, probably a year.
A year
from now.
Perhaps in September at a film festival.
That's the deadline.
Yes.
It's about a little boy growing up in World War II. He wants to be the best Nazi he can, and he finds out that his mother's hiding a girl in his attic.
Okay, there you go. That wasn't so hard. We haven't talked about Thor Ragnarok, kind of on purpose. But before we go out, I mean, I hope everyone's had a chance to see this remarkable film. I think one of the very best films in that whole universe. But I'm curious what it's meant for you in terms of what happens now, what happens next. Is it open doors?
Well, my kids eat.
Yeah?
They have 3 square meals a day now. Pay my rent. It was an incredible experience, and it was something that, like, I had never really thought of myself doing something like that. I just had my second kid, and I was in Hawaii, and I was editing Hunt for the Wilderpeople, and then Marvel said, "Oh, you're going to come and talk about doing this film?" And I was like, "Is this a joke? Why would you? What? Me?" And and so I went and talked to them about it. And I grew up with comic books. I collected comic books for many years as a teenager. Put them in those super dust covers with a little cardboard backing thing, and I was like, "No one touched my comic books." Yeah, I was obsessed. So it wasn't like I'd come out of nowhere, like not but yeah, it was also something that I think I wanted to do something very, very uncomfortable for myself and very different, because I felt when I was doing Hunt for the Wilderpeople, which I'm proud of that film, but I felt like if I was going to do another one of those films, like a Taika film, then I felt like it was a bit too complacent. I was going to be like sort of in a pattern. Right. And so this was something that was going to put me right out of my comfort zone. And also, I'm all about continually learning about this. Like, I just found out what a techno crane was, like on Thor. That's like, that was my 5th movie, and I found out on that job what a techno crane is. I don't know the names of these fucking things. Like, so I was like, "Oh, that thing that looks like a train that like goes along the little train tracks. Like, put that. Yeah, can we just make that go?" Like, that's how I describe stuff on set. And I don't know. I didn't grow up with the shit. So like, I'm consistently trying to learn more about this stuff. So did Thor. I learned what a techno crane is, and next job.
That's good. You really did do something, I think, remarkable. There's a lot about that movie that I find, besides being just completely entertaining, but subversive about it. And I think that dropping your voice into that universe, I think was important. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We have a little bit of time for your questions. We've got microphones in the room. If you've got a question, please raise your hand. We'll get a mic to you as soon as we can. Let's go to this gentleman right here first in the baseball cap.
Stand up and tell me your life story before your question.
I was a young man. Okay. So my basic question is, because, like, firstly, I love your work. You're a great inspiration for me. Like, I feel like our backgrounds are very similar. Like, I come from South Africa, so you're a hero of mine. So my one question is, I also like writing scripts that aren't like the usual script that's very like off the beat and also like has a bit of humor, not to the normal. So how do you, like, what advice would you give to pitch something like that to investors and try and get them on board with something that's not really of the norm?
Sadly, I've never, I mean, also I'm happy about it, but I've never had to really do pitching or try and like find finance that way. Like, we're very lucky in New Zealand with the Film Commission. Like, if you go to them and you have a project that they believe in, then that's sort of how we get our stuff funded. And so only outside of that, I've only worked with Marvel and recently Fox Searchlight on my World War II film. But traditionally, what I do, because I have a lot of friends who are writers, and they say things like, "Oh, I've got this great idea, it's about this and this and this." I say, "Oh, great, so you should write that." And they go, "I'm going to wait till I get some funding." I thought you were a writer. No, but I'm going to wait until, because I'm going to put in my petition and get some money, and then I can start writing. But that's not how it works. You just, if you want to write something, you're passionate about it, you just got to write it. Like, you just got to write it. And so I've never, traditionally I just wrote my scripts until they were at a point where I thought that they were ready to shoot, and then I went for finance. I didn't go in and go, I've got a one-page synopsis, and I want money so that I can start, like, so my fingers will work. It's like, no, I would just like do the work, write for a year, and then go in and say, this is what I've worked on. I think this film's good, and so that's how I work. I would do the work first and then take it to them.
Thank you. Question here. Who's got the? Oh, you've got the microphone. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Oh, hi. If you couldn't see me already, here I am.
I can see.
Thor Ragnarok was kind of a page one rewrite for the character in a lot of ways. Assuming the knowledge of like how many fingers must be in the future of that character and like the molding of it, I want to know kind of from you how much of that was Disney coming to you and saying, hey, make him a Taika character, or was it you saying like, I have an idea for him and this is what I want to do?
Well, really it was, they wanted to do something different with him, but also a lot of that was Chris. So Chris wanted to do something, to make the character interesting for him, he wanted to do something different, because I think in all honesty, that character, they hadn't really, wow, my voice is so husky right now, so sexy. It's not lost on me. I'm going to go back to my hotel and I'm going to just talk to myself. So, yeah, I had ideas about like, because my ideas of what a hero should be in a film like that is basically Kurt Russell. Who is the greatest heroic actor of all time.
Kurt Russell. Okay.
Kurt Russell in Big Trouble in Little China is the greatest. Jack Burton, the only thing, his only motivation in the entire film is to get his truck back. That's all he wants. He comes across these crazy situations and monsters and he's like, oh man, I just want my truck back. And that's the kind of like person. It's like he's an everyman who's like put in a, so with Thor, really when you look at what, if those of you who've seen it, when you look at the story, it's a rich kid who's like trapped in the ghetto. And he's trying to get home. And that's it. He's like, I just want to go home. It's scary. I want to go home. So that's it. And if you can like tap into that, and like, okay, people identify with that. It's like, there's a guy who just wants to go home. And yeah, it's just as a murderer. But like, yeah, so that's really what I said to them was like, you guys you just got to like tap into like Chris's, like his ability to be, he's a very, very funny guy. And so, and so I think like what we managed to do, luckily, was, put more of Chris into the character. And so it's really, he was able to play more of himself into the character, and that's why I think the character is now the most popular character in the MCU.
All right, where are we going? Over here? Yep, go ahead.
Where are we going with this?
Hi, Taika.
Hi.
So you do mostly comedy. That's like what you're drawn to. That's what your
dare you?
voice is. I'm so sorry. Pigeonholes you. But my question is, did you always know that was kind of what you wanted to write? And do you have any advice for people who want to write? Like right now, I'm writing something that's like very dramatic and tragic, but I feel like
Stop.
Stop.
Just
Okay,
stop.
just don't do it, eh?
We don't need any more depressing films. No, when I wrote Boy, the first version of Boy was super depressing and super sad, and Hunt for the Wilder People, the first version, was like just sad. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to be like Lucas Moodyson. I'm just going to make it really depressing. I realized I don't know how to do that. I'm not good at that. And so I decided to just look at what I was good at, which is, I'm a reprobate, and I'm like, don't like rules, and I don't like depressing films. Like, I decided, I made a choice. I said to myself, do you really like depressing films? And I said back to myself in a husky voice, no. No. And, and Jermaine said a really important thing to me when we were shooting what we did in the shadows. There was a point where we were like, we're turning like a 5-minute idea into a feature film. This is what we're doing. And he goes, dude, the world needs stupid shit. We need the ridiculous, because, who wants to go and see a film that reminds us about how terrible the world is? We just like go on Twitter and let's just look at the news and save ourselves 2 hours. So I think we need an escape. We need these things to remind ourselves that we are stupid creatures. We are clumsy. We're the clumsiest of all animals. Nowhere in the animal kingdom will you see an animal that will like smash their head like 4 times in a row on on something, or trip over themselves. We are dumb as shit. So we should embrace that. And so yes, there's room for beautiful human films, maybe the dramatic, but I think that you can also it's like a little you subvert that, it's just like the payload is like the themes and the stuff that means something. But if the plane is like dressed like a clown and everyone's going, oh, cool plane, and then you drop that payload, that's the way I think that makes a film important. Because every day, you think people walk around being depressed all day long, and I mean, some do, yes, but it's no one walks around in a Dancer in the Dark kind of situation. It's like. Or like Breaking the Waves, this is sad. It's light and dark all day long, So I think that's why I like my films, is because it's like light and dark, and there's a mix, and you've got to find that balance. But that's why I think the way I try and do things is more human, more in touch with how humans are every day. If you come from a shit background and poor community, you laugh all day long.
Thank you. All right, we've got very little time. Yes, we'll go here and then there, and then we're done. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Eilick. I'm an Inuit filmmaker from Northern Canada. And something that I think a lot of Indigenous content, especially in North America, I think audiences expect Indigenous people to be stoic and on hilltops, on horseback with our hair blowing in the wind. And I think that audiences can appreciate and sort of respect that sort of version of indigeneity, and they come to expect it. And then when Indigenous voice or Indigenous characters are portrayed as cool business people, watching Netflix or doing things in a 2018 context, it's like, oh well, where's their ancestors? Where's the what you were 100%. Experiencing in New Zealand? So is there advice for what Indigenous creators can do, but also how non-Indigenous audiences, where we need to go to help change the perception of Indigenous body and voice and creation on screen?
So and it's a great question, and I've always heard that I've been criticised for saying in the past that I've said I'm not a Māori filmmaker, I'm just a filmmaker. Like you wouldn't say there's there's an obese filmmaker. So Polanski is a white filmmaker. You didn't say that. So why am I have to qualify everything with I'm a Māori filmmaker? But having said that, I'm very proud of being a Māori filmmaker. You know, I'm proud to represent my people, and I'm proud that now in a community where when I was growing up, there were 3 jobs. Now kids come up and say, oh, I want to be a filmmaker, I want to be a dancer, I want to be an actor. You know, so, you know, the tide's turning, and you know, there's shifts happening, which is I feel very proud of that. In terms of like, which is very similar to when I was talking before about, you know, like people saying, oh yeah, maybe you could add some more like nose flutes in the soundtrack of your film, you know, and like, oh maybe, oh yeah, maybe perhaps that character's you know, a spirit guide. You know, oh, and then maybe the character goes to his grandmother for some advice, you know, and like I looked at my grandmother, she was like, I don't know, you know. I was like, what am I gonna do in my life? She was like, fucking go chop some wood, motherfucker. And so like, you know, we don't always have the answers, and you know, and then we don't have like, so that's what I think where we should be going. Look, Once Warriors is like one of the greatest films that New Zealand's ever produced, and it is one of my favourite films, you know, and it's in my top 10 favourite films. But we don't have to make it again. You know, it's a fucking incredible film. But how about let's make a comedy about, I mean, Boy essentially is a kind of strange comedy about child neglect. And why not, you know? And so, like, so that's what I think. It's like we have to just keep them guessing, really, you know, because what they're guessing is that we're just going to do like a fucking version of Avatar or some shit, you know. So like, you know, but you know, if you twist that and if you twist that and you know, and don't give them what they expect, that makes us more interesting. And we're in a very cool place right now where Hollywood is running out of ideas. They are like scrambling. They're scrambling for ideas and stories. And where do they turn? Indigenous people, ethnic people. They turn to like Korea, Japan. They turn to anywhere outside of America for films that they can remake, for things that are outside of their comfort zone, because that's where the interesting stuff is. So we're in a good place. And like, you know, if we just ride it and just be true to like, you know, our own vision and our own stories and our own voices, and not conform to that, you know, not go, oh, it's like, you know, what happens in Vegas, but with brown people. You know, maybe there's a good film in that, but if we like stick to our own, you know, our own guns, then I think, you know, we're in a good place. So just speak your truth.
Thank you. Just take one last question right here. Can we just get the microphone to this lady right here with her hand up? Thank you. And we'll have to be brief on the last one because we're a little bit over time.
Kia ora, Taika.
Kia ora.
Happy Jewish New Year.
Kia ora.
I wanted to know, I heard a rumour that you're playing Hitler in Jojo Rabbit, and I just wondered about the choice of a Jewish Māori playing Hitler, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. The answer's simple. What better fuck you to that guy than...
I think that's your answer.
That's it.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Taika Waititi.